the very first thing you have to do is teach your front desk how to identify all those potential patients, because in most cases, we're actually losing patients before we ever actually have a chance to convert them. And it's usually those shopper calls. So, you know, patient calls and they say, do you take my insurance? Do you treat my condition? What's your private pay rate? What are your hours, right? And so if the first thing you want your front office to do is be able to
well, actually, Dee, sorry, I don't want to cut you off. One thing, everyone, as you type in the chat, can you change it to your drop-down menu to panelists and attendees so everyone can see what's going on? Because there's a lot of stuff that's happening, but no one can see it, right? So maybe type that, maybe retype what the one thing you want to learn from Dee in the chat. It's you got on your drop-down menu, you have to put panelists and attendees. Please do that. And then Dee, sorry to cut you off. I just want everyone to see like all the good stuff happening there.
Yeah, so first of all, you have to teach your staff needs to understand and be able to really track and follow everybody that's a potential patient, right? Because our staff tend to feel most comfortable with that person that calls you and says, hi, I need physical therapy, or hi, I need veterinary services, or hi, I need chiropractic services. And what happens is they miss those people that are calling that low-hanging fruit. So my first piece of advice is, number one, they have to be able to identify all of those potential leads and recognize that all of them can be converted on that initial call, right? So that's first. The next thing I would suggest with that is they have to recognize that, look, people don't get better or don't recover. Our pets don't recover. We don't get the care we need if we don't show up. So they have to understand the purpose of any phone call is not to necessarily jump to answer questions, but to actually remain in control of that phone call so they convert that patient. And you can convert in-network, out-of-network, cold leads, past patients, referrals, very simply by managing the patient properly. And that's a big part of what I do when I train front desk staff is teach them how to convert people, how to manage them more properly so that they're not being nice, right? We can confuse being nice, Rick, with being in control. Like I can't tell you what to do, which I can't, but I need to be able to control where you go so that you're not struggling. You don't make the wrong decision.
So Dee, like I've listened to, like, you know, I call here, this is what we do. We analyze phone conversations. You know, we've analyzed over 100,000, like last month, over 100,000 patient conversations, right? And what I could tell you is that like most people, when they call a clinic, right, it seems like they're taking when a patient or a lead calls a clinic, it seems like it's a transaction, you know? Yeah. You know, it seems like they are like buying like, you know, broccoli at a grocery store.
Yeah.
It's taking an order. So Dee, maybe you could talk about like how, like, you know, maybe like the first thing that should happen is like, you know, why that first phone call should like feel like a conversation you would have with your grandma versus making a transactional, like, you know, like, hey, you want to buy some gas or like you want to buy some diesel? You know what I mean? You know, and this is the cost, this is the price, take it or leave it.
Right, right. So somebody asked in one of the questions earlier, they said, you know, how do you get, you know, like when you're getting patients? Well, first of all, you have to promote a service that you provide. You have to promote to the problem that somebody has and get them to reach out. And then your front office team needs, that first phone call can't sound like this. So I demoed this for Rick before. I don't care what practice you are or what specialty you have, your first phone call can't sound like click, good afternoon, Dr. So-and-so's office. And then the patient says, or the person says, yeah, I need to get in, or what are your services, or can you help me? And then you hear the doctors or the medical office say, are you a current patient? Okay, and what's your insurance? And okay, I can get you in on this date, right? That sounds transactional. And what that sounds like, what does that sound like to you, Rick? Like if somebody's handling you that way on the phone, what's missing from that conversation?
How about empathy?
Yeah, well, empathy.
And you know what I think, like, you know, like, actually type in the chat. I want to know like how many people in here, like their role, are you an owner or are you like a manager? Or are you a front desk? But type that in the chat, everyone, you know, what are you? Are you an owner, manager, front desk, you know, right? You know?
Yeah, and so if you think about it, for those of you that are owners and managers, right? Physios, this is real for you too. Yeah, so we're probably like 50-50 owners, managers. Oh, there's some front desk on here. Good. So when
I'm going to answer your question because, you know, so back to your original question.
Yeah.
Is that, you know, like, I think for, oh man, I forgot. What was the question?
Well, you were asking me, you were talking to me about, well, you were talking about the grandmother relationship. So I demoed for you the phone call that we naturally have when we call our doctor's office or veterinary office or, you know, any kind of provider's office or anything in a service industry, right? So there's three things that have to happen on this first call. And so training our front desk staff to be able to handle and create these three things is very valuable. So first of all, we have to get the person communicating with us, right? Communication is key. It's not, we have to, and it has to be two-way communication. So if Rick's calling me and I answer the phone, right? I have to make Rick feel welcome. So first of all, there has to be a greeting that's not like, hello, and it can't say Dr. So-and-so's office. It has to be like, you know, good afternoon, Anywhere Physical Therapy. This is Dee. How may I help you? Right. So there's a components to a greeting so that when I say, how may I help you? Rick's like, oh, I'm welcome to talk to Dee. Now I feel like, okay, there's something here, right? We've got to do that. And then we start to really converse with that patient. It's not about immediately offering that patient getting scheduled for your out of network services, for high deductible services, for, private pay, all of those. Somebody else had another one. Cold traffic, right? So when we're dealing with those types of patients and we're not dealing with those people that have come to us for 100 years, they require a little more finesse, but we need a way to make it easy for our staff. Our front office staff need an easy way to manage these patients. So we teach them how to be in control.
Yeah, that's awesome, Dee. And I just want to add is that, like, you know, the experience that you actually want on that first phone call is the same experience you want when that patient sees the clinician for the first time. Like when you do that initial assessment, when you do that initial consult, whether you're a physio, chiro, massage, that's the type of relationship you want to replicate that with your front desk. If that makes sense, type in assessment in the chat, you know, right? Type in assessment in the chat, and that's all we're talking about is that, like, that type of like patient report that you want, it needs to be like copy and pasted with the front desk. Like, Dee, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. So it's not just about the communication. The next thing is the more I get you communicating to me about yourself and what's going on and etc., now you start to trust me. And remember, for those of you that are medical providers, for those of you that are veterinarians, other service industry, I, as a patient, you know nothing about me when I call. Absolutely nothing about me when I call you. And if you don't start to learn something about me, you don't know that I've been somewhere else and had a bad experience or had an uneventful, unexciting experience, or maybe I don't trust this service, but I'm giving you a chance because your ad was so amazing. So the next thing you have to do besides communication is trust. I have to get that person on that phone call to trust me. That's how you sell without being salesy. Right now,
so what do you say? What do you say? What do you say? Like, you know, like, this is great. You know, like you're giving us like good. You know, I think we get this. So what are some tactical? What are a couple like things we could ask like a lead, you know, right, or like a potential new patient, right?
So you know, there's a process. There's a series of questions that you ask that do that, but you're finding out more about this patient, about their experience, where they're at, what has served them, what has not served them. You're not evaluating them as a PT or a physio or a chiropractor, but you are working to find out more, because remember, think about being in an elevator with somebody. You're standing there next to somebody in an elevator, super uncomfortable. But if one of you starts a question and starts a conversation with that person, now the other person's invited to communicate back. And what's the number one thing that people are the most willing to talk about that warms up the conversation? Themselves, right? So you get that patient talking about themselves.
What is give us one question, give a couple of questions that like someone asked, and maybe I can start off sharing, you know. So we do this a lot with like I see this a lot within our community. The one question I actually like to have when people like talk about, like, for example, they're coming for a back, they say like, oh, my back's broken or whatever, you know, or I need help with. The one question I would first ask them is like, what happened? You know, I just want to find out what happened. Tell me more, and they get into their life story about kind of like exactly what happened, and then I like to offer some like sympathy, saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry that I'm so sorry you're in this pain right now. I'm so sorry you're going through this right now. You know, so
Yeah.
D, like, you know, that's something we that I've seen very effective in creating a rapport. Initially in the initial conversation, what are your thoughts about that, and what have you seen that works quite well with the people you work with?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, you have to be in control. If you ask first of all, just one piece of advice, if you ask an open-ended question to a person, and for all my PCCs in front desk on this call right now, they're going to be like, oh my God, yes, right? If I say to you, Rick, what made you pick up the phone and call me today? You could go back to 1970 and start telling me your whole life story. And that is not an efficient or an effective way to manage your patients. So it has to be very efficient. It has to be, the patient care coordinator has to be the one that's in control of this process if we want to sell without being salesy. So first of all, it can't be just, so tell me about your condition, because it turns into this big, long, painful conversation. And the patient care coordinator's got 4 people walking in the door, 3 people checking out. And now it just becomes this stressed out thing. So it's really important to find out, you have to find out what they're suffering with. I love the word suffering, right? Because if you're suffering, what are you more likely to do, Rick?
Yeah. So yeah. Maybe people type in the chat. What is one question that you found to what's one question that we've used to get people to get more? I think Judith in here put how long have you suffered this for? What does this concern keep you from doing? Where else have you been treated? What's your opening question? So go ahead, Dee. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really about finding out what they've been suffering with. What's that one thing they've been suffering with that made them pick up the phone and call? Because think about it, this tells you about your marketing as well, right? So for those of you that are spending a lot of money on social media marketing, if you have to be targeting the problem that a person has to get them to pick up the phone and call you, well, now you have to find out what that is, right? And then as you're doing that, now you're gathering more data. Are they in pain? Think about it. If somebody's in pain, doesn't it make it more urgent for them to want to come in? So
I love what Robin wrote. I love what Robin wrote here. What problem is this keeping you from doing? I want to find out, what is this industry stopping? What is this industry stopping you from doing? Is it because you want to, you're having problems taking a bath with your kid? Is it because you can't play with, you can't play with your grandchild at the park? Right?
Right.
And so.
Yeah, and so it's really about doing those things. And as you start to ask more questions, as you start to really show that you care and you're concerned on this phone call, now the person starts to, you're building rapport, like Crystal said, right? It's really about gathering data to build a relationship. It's not about evaluating the patient. It's not about your physical therapist. It's truly about gathering data so that you're building a relationship. That person feels like there's a relationship with you. If you think about the first call that I demonstrated, there is no relationship there. So if you're dealing with out-of-network patients and you want to be able to handle their objections and you don't have data that you can use to handle their objections, you can't handle their objections, right? So everything you do, your patient care coordinators do starts on the first phone call. They have to greet everybody very welcoming, because you don't know before you answer the phone if it's a new patient on there, right? And so it's really about leading them.
Something that I've seen very effective, I've done a lot of sales training, in general, is using someone's first name a lot, right? Repeating it numerous times in the conversation, because that using the first name is music. Everyone loves their name, and I've there's a girl that I interviewed a couple of sessions ago with her name's the phone lady. All she does is phone sales training, and that was the one time she's the first thing you want to do when you start the phone call is find out their name and use their name repeatedly in the phone call, because that will help build rapport. If that makes sense, type in first name in the chat. This is one thing you could do tactically in terms of scripting and training, and it's just a natural way of doing it. Type in first name in the chat that makes sense. Dee, I want to hear from what your thoughts about this is.
Yeah, I mean, I think first name is really important, but I also think it's about control, right? A big part of, look, our front office staff get on the job training, right? And so Sally trains Sue and Sue trains Bill, and things can get missed. It's like playing a game of telephone. So a lot of times our front office team come with us and they're like, okay, so how do we, you know, like, how do we actually handle that patient so that we can control them? And control is not a bad thing. Control is about helping that lead that patient, like you and I were talking about the first time we met, Rick, leading them on a path, right? And the very first step to getting recovered or to handling their problem, whatever service you're in, is about getting that person to actually schedule an eval or schedule a new patient, new client appointment. And so we can't just be like, oh, what would you like? How would you like it? What works for you? It has to be very, very directed.
This is interesting, D, because I don't know. I hear conflicting like messages on this, and like my thoughts is that if a new patient is worth a couple $1,000s, right, and it takes me an extra 2-3 minutes or 5 minutes to close that deal, I 100% will spend that time, you know?
It is.
And so, once again, like, you know, these sessions is like, you know, I love like these sessions where we kind of debate. So I actually like these kind of open-ended questions where I could actually dive a little deeper, but at the same point, you bring up a good control is like, you do want to control it to a point where like, they don't just ramble on for like the next 20 minutes, right? So what is that kind of fine line between like, you know, getting them to open up, but also keep in control? What are some like tactical things that you could share with the community on how they could keep a conversation in control, you know?
Well, I mean, first of all, you have to be in control of the process. You can't let the patient run that phone call. And, you know, there is a fine line between gathering the right data, because you want to put yourself in a position of authority. I don't want a patient to see me as a receptionist. I don't want my clients' patients to see their front desk staff as a receptionist. They're not a receptionist. Their job is to coordinate the patient's care from the very first phone call through full recovery, right? So that your PTs or your chiros or your other clinicians are solely focused on providing the care. And so, you know, somebody commented in